Thank you so much for sharing your film with us.
Thank you for coming and thank you for staying.
So to begin with, I'm curious how you first connected with Kazu and Fumi.
I met them in 2012 through another film I did, and they just strike me as a very amazing couple. They were very vulnerable to each other, but they're very accepting, of each other's weaknesses, which made them a very strong couple. So I was really enamored by them as a couple. And then I became very curious about their work as lawyers, as openly gay lawyers, which, back then and still now very rare in Japan. So I felt like they had a very good look into the side of Japan that we don't often get to see. These people who come and seek legal help, what type of problems that they're having, and the issues behind these problems. So they became kind of like a window into the side of Japan that I didn't know about. So that's how I started working and filming them.
What was the first project you mentioned where you connected with them initially before?
Oh, it was just another film I co-directed with another director from London called Love Hotel. It's not accessible in Japan. So, yes.
I understand. I didn't know they were involved. Great. And how did you select the cases that you would focus on? I imagine it would take a lot of collaboration with the law firm to see what can be shown, what could be made public.
I couldn't film most of their clients. They were very protective over their clients, obviously. And a lot of the cases that they do, like divorce cases or bankruptcy cases, obviously these cases, I think, shows a real insight into the type of work they do, but I just couldn't access a lot of them, a lot of their clients. So they introduced me to some clients that they felt might benefit from being filmed, and they happen to be more activist type of case, like Rokudenashiko and the teacher who refuses to stand and sing the national anthem. These people really wanted their story out and be covered why they're doing it. So yes, it was kind of like a natural selection. I couldn't film most of their work.
Yeah. Makes sense. I think one of the most remarkable things about the film for me is that it does have such a collaborative and playful sense, where you're even collaborating on a music video tribute that one is making to the other. In addition to really being sensitive to people not wanting to be filmed or not wanting to have their face shown, such as a pride march or the various clients, like the woman who is locked out of the registry system. Can you talk a little bit more about that collaboration where it doesn't feel constricted by these, really respecting the subject, but you kind of open up a whole new world of discovery, at least for me?
Yeah, I mean, I really took the cue from them of what I could film because of a lot of what they do is so sensitive. And they are first and foremost lawyers, so I really had to just listen and learn from watching them, and also just kind of wait until I felt comfortable enough even asking whether I could, film certain things. But they trusted me quite early on because of the way we were filming, was just asking them to just carry on as usual and we'll film. But obviously their office is full of sensitive information. So we were very aware of that, and they made sure that we weren't, we weren't filming certain things, and even if we were, we showed them after editing, and they went through all the sensitive areas, and we blurred some things, and we cut out a lot of footage where they felt like maybe the information was compromised, or so they were very collaborative and very supportive, even in that sense as well. So they really looked at our footage and made sure that their work wasn't compromised, which shouldn't. So we were very wary of, aware of that from the get-go. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Absolutely. No, it seems like an appropriate way to proceed.
Yeah.
I first heard about this project actually through the crowdfunding phase.
Really?
And I'm wondering if you could talk about how that was useful for you, and if it not only added to the funding for the project and in what phase, but also if it contributed to building an audience.
Sure. Yeah, well, I do have to actually mention New York actually is quite special for this film because we got early support from an organization called Chicken and Egg Films, which is, New York-based group that supports female filmmakers, and they were one of the first ones to give us funding, and not only funding but support. So they flew me out here with to do workshops with other amazing filmmakers, which really helped this film to be made. And funding is always difficult for a small project like this that took 3 years to make. So we decided to do crowdfunding to raise funds for post-production and editing, which is why we could hire an amazing editor, Takeshi Hata. And that was quite strategic also because we wanted to also build like a audience at that stage in the production. We felt like if we were able to crowdfund and raise the money and also raise awareness of the project, and that was a good I guess it worked. So we really did we kind of focused on the amount of, not so much on the well, obviously we wanted to raise the necessary funds, but also we wanted to create a community. So we got about 900, pledges from all over the world, and that's how we started to build on our audience. So
great. Now, Hikaru-san recently published an essay on a website called The Talk House, just yesterday it went off, right? And it's a really beautiful reflection on your time touring this film around the film festival circuit, but also kind of focusing on some of the difficulties of that, in which kind of difference or otherness can be reproduced or intensified through the way in which films and kind of the popularity and commercialization of films in film festival circuits and elsewhere creates this dynamic. I'm wondering if you could talk about the different places where you've screened the film and reflect on that experience and what you'd like U.S. audiences to learn from the film, or you hope they react to.
I mean, I just sat through the screening, and you guys, I think, was the best audience to date in terms of response. There was a lot of laughters, and I think, it's always nice to hear your audience, I guess, in that sense. I mean, my experience so far has been overwhelmingly positive. It's always nice to meet your audience, in person and hear the responses directly. And it's a privilege, really. And film festivals, they are the, few of the opportunities we get to interact with who we're making the film for. And in terms of this film, I think I've always wanted it to be shown abroad as well as in Japan. And I was always aware of the kind of stereotypical Japan that everybody kind of was aware of, either, the crazy Japan or the conservative Japan or the polite people. But I was conscious of not creating a film about Japan. I just wanted to make a film about the people. So to humanize this image that people might have, but really just focus more on the individual stories and their individual feelings, and humanize this, alien space called Japan. So that really was my intention, really.
I recommend you check out the essay. You can find it on Japan Society Film social media outlets.
Yes, it's called The Awkward Encounters on the Festival Circuit.
And I think because you have this unique approach to making the film, I think audiences in the US can connect to many different aspects of the film and the individuals portrayed in it, in addition to the fight for LGBTQ rights. And, especially, I'm sure I'm not the only one who caught this resonance of the standing for the anthem debate, which connects to a really kind of horrifying debate in the US around allowing U.S. football players to stand in protest, or kneel in protest of police brutality and kind of backlash from white supremacist government. So I'm wondering if there are any other kind of surprise. Are there any other kind of surprise resonances that have come up in different contexts? I think the woman who's kind of fighting to be, recognized by a government has so much resonance across cultures.
Yeah, I have to say the homokoseki, the non-registration story, I don't do justice to the depth and the complexity of that story at all. You can make a feature, a couple of feature films just on that storyline, but I wanted to include it there just because I think how the system can systematically discriminate against an individual just because they don't fit into a certain structure, like a family in this case, which is so deep rooted in particularly in Japanese society. I found where individual can only exist if you're part of that family structure almost, and that was very symbolic of that. So I wanted to include that in this film because I felt like what they were going through was very symbolic of the deep-rooted nature of discrimination once you're outside of a system. And I think in that sense, I think it is resonated into audiences everywhere. So a lot of people have come to me after the screening asking about that case, wanting to know more about that case, and how, family can exist in so many different ways, and yet somehow, if you're not part of a certain image or a structure of a family, you suddenly can find yourself losing your individual right, which is I don't know, maybe in America right now, if I make a link, what's going on with the separation of family almost is interesting in a way that, how families can be mistreated by the structural and the systems.
Kind of the terror once you're just dropped from the government bureaucracy.
Yeah.
It's dystopia.
Yeah. It's a leap, but I wanted to make that connection.
I think it's an important connection. Do we have any questions from the audience? We have microphones on either side of the stage. It looks like we have our first question up here in the third row.
I just wanted to say...
I can hear you.
The film was amazing.
Thank you.
And it was touched on a lot already on stage about parallels between what's going on in our country and Japan in terms of social issues involving LGBT, the separation of families, the anthem. So I just wanted to ask you, in terms of what you see in Japan, you see it because a lot of people would say under the current administration here, LGBT rights are being scaled back. In that sense, do you see in Japan it moving in a positive direction right now, or in a different direction?
I think in terms of the LGBT issue, it's moving forward in Japan, but to be honest, we're so way behind the States and the rest of the world that it's still a slow progress. So it's only in the last few years that the word LGBT was introduced to the kind of a social consciousness, like social collective conscience. So it's still at the very, we're still taking baby steps. In terms of other issues in the film, it's, you know, it's some wins and some loses. So the Anthem case is stagnant. Actually, I think it's actually going worse. And it really shows the problem of like how the state is not, how the legal system is not separate from the state, because of like they really represent the kind of the government position. And so that in a sense is, you know, going worse on the wrong direction. Rokudenashiko's case is quite interesting. She's still awaiting the final verdict from the Supreme Court, but she's being, you know, partially found partially not guilty. But she was charged under police. Her case was a criminal charge. And if you are, you know, criminally charged in Japan, 99% of the times you are prosecuted, like you are found guilty. So in that sense, her case set a precedent. So in that sense, you know, we are, again, it's like baby steps, but she's going in the right direction. In terms of the Mukoseki case, like Anonymous A is still without registration. So in that sense, it's like, yes, she's, you know, recognized as a person, you know, but she doesn't have the papers to prove it yet. So again, it's like, yes, moving forward, but also going, you know, taking steps back.
Looks like we have another question right here.
Could you share with us the reactions of the two lawyers when you approached them about these ideas of this documentaries, and I presume they're very supportive in terms of whether directions or guidance that they help you in terms of putting all the stories together?
Yeah, I mean, I knew them by that time when I approached them for like 2 years, and they were very positive from the very beginning. And it was very collaborative, as you said, and very generous. They were very generous with opening their home to me and my cameraman, Jason, from London, and you know, introducing us to different clients, and also guiding us, making sure that we're not, you know, doing wrong things, that we're not getting in their way, basically, because they are working. Very busy lawyers, so they were very generous in that sense. And but you know, I think filming them for 2 years. Yeah, we filmed them for almost 3 years. It's hard for people to be on camera, and considering that now that this film is made, I'm like forever grateful that they did let us into their lives for so long, because it is stressful. I think it takes a lot away. It's taken a lot out of them, like in terms of energy. But they were driven by wanting to share their stories. I think in the film, Kazu talks about why they're sharing their stories. They could have just ended it there. They were the lucky ones, you know. But they, just because of the work that they do, they get so much. They get so many stories from people who are not in their position, you know, who are not with families that accept them for who they are. So they really are driven by that. They're really driven by wanting to do more and more. So, you know, for this film was also their way of contributing to the change that they want to see. But I think it does take a lot. So I can't stress enough that it's actually, you know, quite a sacrifice on their part. You know, they're already so busy, and they are having to let us in with a camera and constantly rolling, and, you know, it is stressful for them. So I can't help that, you know, it shows how dedicated they are, I think, even the fact that this film was ever made.
More comments? Looks like towards the center here.
Hi, thanks for the film. I just wanted to ask, they showed a lot of emotional connection, obviously, and very vulnerable, but I was interested in knowing the physical part really wasn't shown between two people. If you've been filming them for 2 years, they physically hardly touched themselves. And I wonder if that's something that was edited out, or they weren't comfortable sharing that with you.
It wasn't edited out. I think, you know, if people are not like, it makes sense if they don't want to share everything, you know. And also, like, I do show intimacy, but I also show it in a way that sometimes I'm not like an intrusive type of filmmaker. Like I could go into their bedroom, I guess, but I don't think it kind of served the purpose of this film. So I think they were being quite intimate. They're holding hands and stuff, but I guess that's the difference between like the PDA here and PDA there. We don't do PDA in Japan really, in general. So yeah.
Any more questions? Let's go here and then in the center.
My favorite question to ask documentarians is, what did you have to leave out that hurt your heart? And like a thread or a scene, or because so much gets cut. So what's the piece that you had to cut and you miss?
I mean, there are a few, but just off the top of my head, there was a nice scene where the two of them go and visit Kazu's dad's grave. That was a very lovely scene because he was a very big part of Kazu's life, but passed away before he met Fumi. And but we cut it out. It was a really lovely scene that even now thinking about it, I'm like, oh, even like composed music to it. But we just thought it was too private, actually. It was too private for him, so we cut it out.
We have a mic over here, and then maybe if someone has a question on this side, I don't want to neglect.
Hi. So I guess even if we don't execute it so well, here in the United States we have a language of civil rights and a public understanding of that language. And considering you spent 2 years immersed in it, are you seeing Japanese society starting to have that language as well, and the public hearing that language and understanding it, or is that not going anywhere?
Do you mean public, like language of?
The actual words of civil rights, of explaining to other people what civil rights are and why they should exist, and why we should care that other people have them as well as ourselves.
Right. I think it's my personal experience with that is it's still very difficult to discuss anything that's like contentious and like political in Japan outside of like a circle of friends who have the same opinion. It goes back to kind of this whole problem you have like reading the air, you know, like you're not supposed to disrupt the peace or the fun times that people are having when they're drinking or at work. And I was told that I shouldn't talk about politics at work or drink when you're drinking with colleagues or friends. And I'm like, when do you talk about it then? They're like, never. I'm like, okay, fine. So I think there is this problem of discussion in general in Japan. Like there's not many places where you can discuss with people, especially of people of like different ideas and different opinions. And it's the same with when it comes to like human rights, you know? It's such a big word anyway, and people just kind of either switch off, or there are people who talk about it, but they tend to talk about it among themselves. So it's kind of, I think it's more divided in Japan where discussions happen, and it's more selective. So does that answer your question, kind of?
I guess so. So basically not really changing in that aspect.
I mean, I think changes, First of all, I think there are changes, but like the same as before, it's kind of baby steps, and more people. I would have to actually, younger generation, there are more kids who are, you know, in their early 20s. There was this big movement in Japan against the other government of in the last few years, and you kind of see the protest in the film as well. That was actually a big part of that was started by young university students. And actually, in that sense, that's a big change. It never kind of, we haven't seen that change in a while. So yeah, there are changes, but baby steps.
Thank you.
It was a beautiful transition, by the way, from the discussion of reading the air to the public announcements on the subway trains, the way in which public space and private space is regulated, which happens here in the US too. See something, say something, right? Do we have any more questions? It looks like towards the middle there, and then up 2 rows, if you could pass it back afterwards.
Hi, amazing film. Thank you. I found myself getting really emotional during the last scene with Kazuma and his girlfriend. It seemed to me like the emotional heart of the film. I just wanted to ask, do you have anything more to say about Kazuma?
I like Kazuma. I mean, he was such a pure soul, I think he really is unpolluted, I would say, in the film. He was involved in the film. I mean, I couldn't film him for a long time just because of how he was, introduced to their family structure. And Fumi really wanted to protect him. So I couldn't film him, and we had to kind of piece together the scenes with him. And he was also underage when he first came to their house. And so we don't have much footage of Kazuma. I didn't interact with Kazuma so much. After the film was made, more so, and I went back to film him. So I couldn't interact with Kazuma without Fumi, really, for a long time. And then when he became old enough to kind of give his own permission, that was the last scene that we filmed with him. So yeah, I feel like my relationship with him grew as part of this process of making this film, and it's quite chronological in that sense. Like, he invited me for dinner, and I was like, oh, can I bring my camera? And he's like, okay. So that's how it happened. And then the girlfriend just happened to be there, and she's quite a nice touch in the scene. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that scene. We have time for just 1 or 2 more questions, so you have the mic.
Thank you so much for sharing the story. It was really beautiful. I wanted to hear how this movie has been received in Japan by critics and the audience, and then I would like to hear if there are ways, like concrete ways, in which it has helped their cause. And then just one last question. Sorry, so many, but I'm curious if you're going to explore these topics more in future films.
Okay. What was the last question?
Are you going to explore these topics more in future projects?
Right. Okay. So we haven't released the film in Japan yet. It's only played at Tokyo International Film Festival last year in October, and it was really well received there. And I was able to, bring Kazu and Fumi and Mary, Kazu's mom, to the red carpet, and they also came to one of the Q&As. And I think for them it was nice to, see it with the audience and get the warm reception that it did. So it's not yet released. It's going to be released in September in Japan. So we don't know how it's going to be received until then, like outside of the festival. And will I explore the topic? I really do want to explore the Mukoseki case a bit more. I don't know in what form yet, because obviously they can't really show their face. And Natsuo was the only person that I was in touch with who, because he got the registration and he wanted to really help the cause of spreading the word about this problem that we have. He was the only one that I was able to film showing his face, but a lot of the people without registration are, stigmatized, and they do have to live on the edge of society. So I'm trying to figure out the way of telling that story at the moment.
Time for one last quick question. If we could bring the microphone here towards the front.
Hi, thank you for the film. I just had a quick question. My impression of like the LGBT and queer theory and community in Japan is that there are a lot of people in Osaka, or there seems to be like a really big community in Osaka, and I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
I think it's a community. I'm not sure. I don't know too much about the LGBTQ community as such in Japan. And there are certainly areas where people go. I don't know if it's particularly big in Osaka. I think it's bigger in Tokyo. But because I'm not queer myself, I don't have much access to certain areas, I think. And LGBTQ community in itself is very diverse anyway. So I don't know, I'm not really in the position to like talk on their behalf, and neither are my lawyers, because I feel like they're also like, they don't represent it either. You know, they're kind of like one of the few who are open. So in that sense, they're kind of like a minority within the LGBTQ community in that sense, even though they're, you know, they're considered like a spokesperson for it by like mainstream media now that, you know, they're more, they do speak about rights, but yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know much about, I know that not many people are out, you know, not many people feel comfortable to be who they are in Japan yet, and that's a big reality. So in that sense, it's still a problem that, you know, it's still an issue that we have to progress with. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry, I'm a bit jet lagged. So I'm not very articulate, but we can talk later as well. You can catch me outside.
Yes, we will be going outside the theater, and we have a sold-out show next. So please join me in a big round of applause for director Hikaru Toda.
Thank you so much.